I'm standing in the Railroad Creek timber sale, and DNR wants to punch a road through this exact spot. They want to thin this forest, cut down many of these beautiful old trees in the name of habitat restoration. In 2023 and 2024, the legislature allocated money into DNR to increase thinning on state lands. And there are many DNR lands that would benefit from thinning. We're talking about plantation forests with 40-year-old trees that are all this big around, and were those forests to be thinned, it would actually enhance forest structure. Instead, DNR has chosen to take a structurally complex native forest, this one, containing trees that are 4 feet in diameter and 100 years old, take an already diverse forest with patchy canopy and wide spacing between trees, and thin it for the sake of board feet. Trees like these are extremely valuable, and from an economic perspective, DNR would much rather thin a diverse native lowland forest than they would thin a homogeneous plantation with small trees. Yet if you thin the homogeneous plantation, that will increase habitat. If you thin this forest, you will degrade habitat. Namely, DNR wants to blast a road through where I'm standing, converting around 3 acres of this forest into a deforested area, a roadway. That roadway is going to act as a corridor for invasive species, and it will also expose the surrounding stand to disease and blowdown. So check this out. One of the reasons that the DNR says you need to thin forests like this is to create canopy gaps, because they say that they're too tightly grown and too homogeneous. They call stands like this homogeneous stands often, to give the impression that they are very dense stands that don't have any gaps, that are very, not diverse. That's what homogeneous means. I'm standing in a canopy gap that must cover half an acre at least. And if you check it out, you'll see that it is a massively diverse, beautiful little habitat in here. DNR acknowledges that this forest is structurally complex, in the maturation 2 stage of stand development. But at the same time, they're saying it's very homogeneous and it needs to be thinned to create patchiness in the canopy, to create wider spacings between trees, to allow it to become, more of a structurally complex, old growth-like forest. Yet, as you can see, this forest already has those characteristics. It's already structurally complex, and it already has patchiness in the canopy, diverse spacing of trees. So the real reason DNR wants to log in this forest is because compared to logging in a plantation, this forest has much more volume, and they'd rather thin a stand that has very high timber value, because they can then take large diameter pole trees out of here, instead of thinning the plantation forests that need to be thinned. So let's check out something I'm observing in this forest. If you look up into the canopy, you'll see that the big Douglas fir trees that had self-pruning at one point, where they lost their lower branches, they are actually resprouting their branches from their trunks. And that's called epicormic branching. And the reason that the trees are doing this is because they've gotten really tall. The forest has already thinned itself out somewhat. And now that that forest has thinned out after that biomass accumulation phase, the trees are sensing that there's more light in the environment, so they're sending out those epicormic branches. Epicormic branches are all over this forest. I'm pretty sure every tree I see has at least some epicormic branches. And some of them are small and some of them are really big and really well developed at this point. And this is a sure sign that this forest does not need to be thinned, because this forest has already thinned. It went through that biomass accumulation phase. The trees got really tall and some of them died. And now it's opening up. There's patchiness in the canopy, and it is allowing those trees to gain those epicormic branches, which is a sure feature that this forest is on a good trajectory towards becoming a structurally complex old growth forest, and it's already very complex. I'm standing here and I've heard about 6 birds in just this one spot, all singing their morning song. And these diverse native forests are used by specific species that only use old forests. And part of the reason why they like old forests are the standing dead trees. And part of the thinning is a removal of those trees. Generally, those trees are considered hazards. So when they roll machinery through here, when they have loggers in here cutting down, these larger trees by hand, those snags will be cut down and left on the forest floor to rot. Sometimes DNR will make new snags by girdling living trees, but it just goes to show that when you go into a diverse native ecosystem like this and disrupt it, it's extremely hard to do that without really disrupting it. Right now, I'm standing in the plantation forest right next to the Railroad Creek timber sale. So this is outside of the timber sale, but this is a great example of a forest that could actually benefit from thinning. This forest was planted by hand. All of the trees are the same age, and it has almost no species diversity. They are all Douglas fir. The understory is very sparse, and there's almost no structural diversity because this area was completely clear-cut about 40 years ago. This forest would benefit from thinning because it would create canopy gaps and it would enhance the understory. It would allow for some patchiness, and DNR could also get timber out of this forest, and in the meantime the trees that they leave behind would grow faster. This is the exact opposite of Railroad Creek. Railroad Creek is a species-rich, naturally regenerated, diverse native forest, and this is a plantation that is much more akin to a crop, and some thinning in here would actually make it resemble more of a natural ecosystem. One of the things that you'll notice is that this plantation forest does have fairly large trees that DNR could sell as timber. However, they are short trees. They're not 200 feet tall, and they aren't as valuable wood. But DNR could still be creating revenue from thinning these forests, and in so doing creating better habitat. But instead, they're going after the really high-value tall pole trees, which are in older native forests, as opposed to helping these younger forests reach a more structurally complex state and help it set them on a trajectory to growing those sorts of trees in the future. DNR is currently misapplying thinning to commercially valuable stands when they should be thinning stands like this that have much less commercial value, but thinning in these stands makes for much better and much more sound ecological forest management, but less board feet. So DNR needs to be prioritizing ecological forestry in these younger stands and leaving the older stands, like Railroad Creek, alone to become old growth on their own. They're naturally regenerated native forests. They don't need our help in most cases. The Railroad Creek timber sale is a great example of what we should not be doing. We should not be targeting the oldest forests for thinning. We should be targeting the youngest forests for thinning to enhance those forests' structure and enhance their ability to grow old and to grow structurally complex and to grow timber. Forests like these are rare and need to be left alone. Please email your county council member, commissioner, or representative about the need to protect lowland forests, including from thinning, and please consider reaching out to the DNR to tell them that you oppose the Railroad Creek timber sale. Thank you. Now, I do want to note that this timber sale is on pause right now. It was put on pause when Commissioner Upthegrove took office, and it was originally conceived of under Commissioner Hilary Franz. So as DNR works through its old forest plans and policies, it's really important that areas like this aren't left out simply because this timber sale is planned to be a commercial thinning as opposed to a clear cut. DNR should be protecting all of our native lowland forests.